So the video that you're about to listen to, and yes, listen because these videos are mostly about the audio content, it's about a movie called Lords of Chaos, which I actually saw a couple of months ago and actually recorded the audio you're listening to a while ago. But I'm adding in this little bit at the beginning to let you know that the movie is about the events around a band and a record they were making called Mysteriis Sathanas. Now, I have a music blog where I write about music. I've written about that record, and I also have a music channel where I'm now orating all of these blogs. I say all of them. I'm selecting some of them, and a lot of the new ones that I write about end up over there. But as you might guess, I have orated the Mysteriis Sathanas blog, so this is kind of like a little bit of cross promotion. I've made a new channel called Xisuma Music, and if you look in the description box, you can find a link to me talking about the record that this movie that I'm talking about in this video is based on. So go check it out if it interests you. So I finally got around to watching Lords of Chaos, which is a movie. A couple of years ago it was released. It's about the Norwegian black metal scene of the early 90s, or so it says. It really actually focuses on just one band, which is Mayhem, and it's based on a book of the same name, and I think I read it many years ago, and I can't remember if the book focuses on the scene as a whole, but this movie is really about the band Mayhem and its guitarist Euronymous. Now, I learned about this stuff 8 to 9 years later on from when these events transpired, which the movie focuses on. And I learned about it through internet culture, learning and reading stuff online, stories from various people within the scene, and possibly I read the book as well. It was absolutely shocking to read about what happened, but initially I was just drawn to the music itself. When I first heard black metal, it was kind of a bit of a step back and like, whoa, what is this? Like, why is this appealing? And I think because the internet was starting to blossom with the sharing of MP3s and the sharing of information, there was kind of a big sort of gathering around black metal as it was in recent memory. And since those events, the scene had exploded. So there was kind of like a focus which I kind of fell into. Started listening to this music, very curious about it at first, and then eventually just got engulfed with it. And in enjoying the music, I then read the stories and really got kind of sucked into this crazy series of events which happened, which are portrayed in this movie. However, it was a long time ago for me that I really engaged and indulged in all of this information, so my memory on the details when going into this movie were kind of foggy. Now, it came out in 2018, and there is a reason for me not seeing it sooner. It's because I kind of had a knee-jerk reaction and fell in line with a lot of the metal community that had a negative reaction to seeing the trailer and learning about the creation of this movie. So the trailer has those very American, movie-friendly voices. The dialogue isn't particularly how normal people talk to one another. It's very, for the screen. And so I had that knee-jerk reaction. And this is the kind of thing that I try to remind myself not to do anymore, because it's kind of like that elitist black metal reaction. No, they can't make a movie about this stuff, whereas really I don't care so much about that anymore. And so that was like my initial barrier to entry with this movie. However, something put it in front of me, online. Maybe it was an advert or I saw it in a YouTube video, but it came around my way, and I noticed that the main actor who plays Euronymous was Rory Culkin, and I've actually seen him since in a couple of movies and TV shows and thought that he's a really great actor. And so that kind of lured me in and made me think, well, maybe I should give this movie a go. And I reminded myself that all these ideas you have in your head about what something's going to be, you don't really know until you watch it. So I decided to ditch all of my expectations and just go in, take this thing for what it was. And you know what? Pretty quickly I got sucked in and absolutely loved the experience of watching the movie. But that's mainly because of how it reignited my curiosity with black metal and the story that brought all of that to life. And so I really enjoyed the experience of watching this movie. Now, once I've stepped back from watching it and been thinking about it a lot and processing it, I realised it's a relatively reasonable film, competent acting. There are 3 absolutely shocking scenes depicted in very graphic detail. If you're listening to this considering watching it and you don't like that kind of graphic violence, you probably want to steer clear of this one. But the first scene then kind of reminded me and put me in the lane of realizing this is just going to literally be the series of events that took place. I don't know why I didn't go into it thinking that, but after the first shocking scene, I kind of realized you're going to eventually see everything else that is a part of this shocking story. It also had a fair few scenes that felt largely fabricated, a lot of character development or interactions that I don't really recall being documented, but are probably there to move the story along and to build characters and link events together. I also absolutely love the inclusion of these photographic moments, because a lot of this is trying to be very faithful, especially with the costume design and set location, and so they like to just steer the moments in the movie to the pictures you would have seen online researching this, like I did many years ago, and that made it all the more vivid every time the scene kind of wrapped up with those photographic moments. So I also enjoyed the live performances as well. The moments where the music would come in were very goosebumpy, not having heard some of those songs in a while, and the performance with Dead Live was a really fascinating part of the whole movie. I also loved the movie's sense of humor. It kind of portrayed some of the characters as being young, a little naive and goofy, and so there were lots of insertion of humor there, especially the scene with Varg where he's interviewed by the press. You see, he actually contacts the press to try and take claim for some of the events that have taken place in the movie, whilst trying to remain anonymous, but also trying to be intimidating and mysterious, and it really kind of falls flat on its arse, and that whole scene is just absolutely hilarious. So my conclusion to this movie is less about the movie itself, actually. It's more about the story and how I relate to it, because I'm older now and more mature, and when I was younger, this felt far more real about the evil and mysteriousness of black metal, whereas now that I'm older, it's far more about young, youthful, passionate people full of anger and confusion that are seeking an identity and approval, and how those things can lead you down a dangerous path. If I look back on my own behavior and my former self, I see some similarities and parallels that led me into bad places. And so now I look at these characters in the series of events as, you know, young, immature people full of all of these emotional and identity issues that manifest horribly, as you'll see in this movie. And really, the whole story has just been framed very differently in my mind now, looking back on this. I see a lot more naivety and youthful stupidity than I once did when I first learned about this story. And that leads me to some criticisms of this movie as well. It's actually probably not that good of a movie to watch unless you're motivated in the movie itself. The arcs of the characters and the plotline, etc., is kind of hinged to these events that take place, whereas as a movie itself, the arc isn't really that well formed. The Euronymous narrative I felt was highly creative, because, you know, there his inner thoughts are constantly being betrayed, but we don't know exactly what his inner thoughts as well. It also gives him a character arc at the end that's kind of redemptive, and I don't really know if that's actually where he was going when the last events of the movie transpired. So that one I found to be an interesting point to discuss, I guess. There's also a lot of portrayal of characters in this movie that is based on hearsay, he says, she says, and a lot of back and forth and opinions. A lot of that stuff is really hard to nail down because it's all just word of mouth from inside the community as well. And the movie potentially underplays the serious aspect of what these young adults were doing, given that they were burning down churches and there were murders. A lot of what they're portrayed as in the movie is, like I said, that sort of youthful naivety, and maybe there's a question around there if that's the correct way to portray this or not. And it also doesn't focus on the scene as a whole. It really is just about Mayhem. So I think the idea that this is about the Norwegian black metal scene, as it says it is, may not really be the best way to portray this movie. It is mainly about Euronymous, who is the leader of the band Mayhem. And with the criticism, I'll throw in some praise as well. The main praise for me is that it really drew me back in to my initial fascination with the story and kind of relit the spark of the music in my mind. And I think it did that through one of the things it should be praised for, which is its pursuit of authenticity. But obviously in dialogue and portrayal of characters, it's very up for debate how much of it is authentic. But in the use of locations and the inclusion of the photography, it really kind of like captured a spirit of the place that this stuff took place in, right? So it made it all that more vivid and real for me, and I think that's something that the movie can be praised for. And after watching the movie and writing down my thoughts, I also did some research and found out a bunch of interesting facts. So the first one is that the director Ackerlund was actually Bathory's drummer, which kind of ties it into the black metal scene a little bit more. And he also described the film as about truth and lies, and it reminded me of the opening quote where it kind of puts that and a few other words in there as well. It is very much about truth and lies, right? Like different people saying different things about what happened. They also had access to a lot of police info on the events that transpired, which allowed them to recreate things you see in the movie a lot more accurately. This includes some locations as well. The Deathlight Silence record shop, Euronymous' flat were, I believe, the real locations, and also one of the churches was rebuilt to look like the one that burnt down, so they could burn it down again to give you a very accurate sense of what it was like. And looking into the feedback online, it seems like the portrayal of Dead was highly praised. I was never particularly drawn to his vocals, and so I didn't really know a lot about him, but it seems that people were happy with his portrayal. However, he never killed cats, which they show in the movie, and why do movies do that, right? Why they got to throw in extra stuff? It's not really needed. However, there was also criticism about the timeline around his death and other events. Apparently, like, years would transpire between particular things which just go from one to the next in the movie, which kind of makes sense because otherwise you got to sort of chop the movie up with, you know, a year has passed by, and sometimes it's just easier in the movie to just flow from one event to the next. And also, Attilia Cashier's son actually played the singer himself, who sung on De Mysteriis Dom Sathanas. However, he was unhappy with the movie, even though his son was in it betraying him. And one final supposedly interesting fact, Varg Vikernes saw the movie and criticised it, and showing his true colours, criticised the actor that portrayed him for being Jewish. So you know exactly where he stands. And that's actually the last of my notes around this movie. If you're a fan of the black metal scene and the music, I think you'll get a kick out of watching it. However, you're probably going to have a lot of thoughts swirling around about the inaccuracies, the he says, she says around how these characters are portrayed, and I think it can't really be anything but a contentious movie, as the material itself is very contentious. Even when learning about it for the first time, learned from multiple sources, this person and that person writing up their series of events, and obviously not everyone was agreeing on what happened. So this is always going to be something that causes a lot of debate and discussion and arguing. But the main thing for me is I watched the movie. Did I enjoy it? Yes, I did, because I absolutely love black metal music. And this just kind of reignited that initial spark, brought me back to that crazy story that I discovered right at the beginning of finding this fantastic music. So anyway, hope you enjoyed listening to my thoughts, and I'll see you soon in another one. Bye-bye.